Black CEO mocked for using black card at hotel. Immediately cancels $2.8 billion deal. She stepped into the hotel lobby in a sharp navy blue suit, her gaze calm, the sound of her heels echoing on the marble floor like the quiet steps of power. But when she handed over the Centurion Black Card, a symbol of global wealth, what awaited her was not respect, but a mocking sneer from the receptionist. "It's probably maxed out." They didn't know who the black woman was. They didn't know that the business card in her purse could determine the fate of a billion-dollar hotel empire. And they certainly didn't know the price to pay for an insult which seemed harmless would be the collapse of the entire enterprise. This story isn't just about a personal affront. It's about how a woman, without yelling, without making a scene, exposed an entire system of discrimination wrapped in the guise of premium service. And with a single $2.8 billion deal cancellation, she woke up an entire industry. The revolving door spun gently and the woman entered. Danielle Whitaker, the black CEO of Dominion Equity Partners, one of the most powerful names in international finance. She wore a meticulously tailored navy blue suit, the sharp lines hugging her tall frame. Her black patent heels clicked with each step, firm and unassuming. Every step she took was like an acoustic test for the powerful space, clear, confident, without needing anyone to make way. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence alone made the lobby pause for a moment. Curious glances flitted past, a few sly looks from the group of guests waiting for champagne in the lounge to her right. These people weren't used to seeing a black woman in such a setting, unless she was the server, the maid, or housekeeping. But Danielle was none of those things. She walked directly to the reception desk. Behind it stood Ethan Garrison, a white male receptionist in his early 30s, with slicked-back brown hair, a perfectly pressed uniform, and a shiny gold tie pin. Ethan was trained in five-star customer service, but he had a very particular cold, disdainful look, especially when serving guests he didn't think were his type. His eyes quickly scanned from Danielle's heels to her Armani suit, then up to her face, finally lingering on her skin. A smirk, almost unnoticeable, briefly flickered at the corner of his mouth. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Ethan said, his voice flat and lacking warmth, his smile clearly forced. "How can we assist you today?" Danielle placed her Chanel bag lightly on the counter, took her phone, and pulled up the reservation confirmation email. She spoke calmly, her tone steady and very clear. "Whitaker. Danielle. I have a reservation for the presidential suite for 3 nights." Ethan glanced at the screen, his pupils momentarily frozen at the name. A brief hesitation. Then he looked at her again, this time more scrutinizingly. It wasn't professional observation, it was a silent evaluation, as if trying to determine whether the woman in front of him could really be the owner of that name. Silence hung thick for a few seconds, but that silence felt heavier than stone. Ethan typed away at the keyboard, then glanced at her once more. He kept his smile, but his voice carried a tone of indifference, mixed with a hint of mockery that only those familiar with discrimination could detect. "Oh, a black card? Those usually expire pretty quickly." The words seemed trivial, but they were spoken loud enough for the people around to hear. A couple sitting near the reception desk glanced at Danielle. A man in a gray suit from the lounge raised his eyebrow, squinting as if watching a silent play unfold right in front of him. Danielle stood still. No smile, no frown, no reaction at all, except in her eyes. Her eyes remained cold, but not angry. They were sharp, like metal. She knew exactly what had just happened. Ethan hadn't seen the card, Ethan had only seen the color of her skin, and he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Danielle kept her expression unchanged. No harsh tone, no blink of an eye. Slowly, she drew the card from the small leather compartment inside her purse. It was a solid, titanium black card, no words, just a delicate silver border and a weight enough to create a heavy clink as it hit the glass desk. The Centurion card, something you can't sign up for, only by invitation. Not for the rich, but for the powerful. Ethan glanced at it for less than a second, and in that very brief moment he allowed himself to judge. "Oh, this one?" His voice was casual, laced with a hint of condescension. "Usually, those are maxed out." No one laughed. But the silence that followed made the words sound like a slap in the middle of the elegant, quiet lobby. A few guests turned their heads. A middle-aged woman on the sofa furrowed her brow. The receptionist at the front desk looked over, clearly anxious. But Ethan didn't notice the rudeness. To him, it was just a casual remark, a way to test power that was still played every day at this front desk, especially with guests who didn't dress the part, didn't speak the right way, or didn't have the correct skin color. Danielle raised her eyes and looked directly at Ethan. Her gaze was now as cold as sharpened glass. Not angry, not hurt, but unnervingly still, like the surface of water that had receded, revealing the cold stone beneath. She didn't respond. She just stared. Ethan faltered slightly. Although he didn't show it, his hand on the keyboard stiffened a bit. A part of him knew he had overstepped. But the other part, the arrogance that had grown from months of standing behind the polished hotel counter, pushed him forward. "I'll check to see if we have a room for you," he said, emphasizing the word "you" with a sarcastic tone. He typed quickly on the machine, typing as if doing her a favor, as if providing her with a place to stay tonight was a grand gesture from the upper class to the marginalized. But he didn't know. The hand resting on the glass had once held contracts for acquiring 6 multinational companies, and the report that this woman was about to submit tomorrow could cost the entire Lancaster Grand Hotel chain a $2.8 billion global expansion investment. And right now, the only thing Ethan was holding was a lethal prejudice. After a few seconds, Ethan looked up. He smiled, but it wasn't the polite smile anymore. It was a self-satisfied, more forceful one. "We have a deluxe room on the 9th floor, but not the presidential suite you mentioned. It seems the system didn't confirm the upgrade request." He paused for a moment and added, "Must be an issue with the card, I guess." Danielle didn't answer. She just nodded, coldly. She took back the card and slipped it into her purse. Her actions were slow, as though etching every detail into the face of time. Then she lightly lowered her head, not in submission, but in courtesy. "I'll take the room," she said. Her voice didn't ripple, but anyone who paid attention would notice something was on the verge of breaking behind that calm wall. She turned and walked away. The sound of her footsteps echoed once again on the marble floor. There was no rush, but with every step there was a promise left unspoken. The game hadn't started, but someone had already lost. Ethan watched her go. Only then did he feel a twinge of doubt, glancing around and noticing a few eyes fixed on him. An older man shook his head. The receptionist beside him remained silent. The entire lobby seemed to freeze for a moment, not because of his words, but because the atmosphere had shifted. Danielle stepped into the elevator, her eyes gently closed, but in her mind every detail was already connected. The words, the look, the system not confirming the room, not a technical glitch. She knew, and she didn't come here to let it slide. The elevator doors closed behind Danielle, leaving behind curious stares and a reception desk sinking into confusion. Ethan Garrison remained standing there, his palms sweaty in a way he couldn't explain. There was something about this woman that he couldn't shake off. Her gaze, her attitude, the quiet, unwavering calm. But Ethan didn't know, or wasn't wise enough to understand, that he had just brushed past a woman he had no right to judge. Her full name was Danielle A. Whitaker, the current CEO of Dominion Equity Partners, a multinational investment firm based in Washington, D.C., specializing in evaluating mergers, expanding global brand chains, with a particular focus on social justice, anti-discrimination, and business ethics standards. At 43, Danielle had graced the cover of Forbes Women in Power and was honored by Fortune as a game changer in global finance. She had investigated and caused the collapse of 3 luxury hotel chains in Europe within 90 days due to violations of employee conduct regarding immigrant workers and black guests. And today, she didn't come to the Lancaster Grand for a vacation. She came to observe, to listen, and above all, to assess whether the $2.8 billion deal between Dominion and the parent company of the Lancaster Grand hotel chain was worthy of her reputation. The deal was expected to help Lancaster Grand expand into Dubai, Singapore, and Cape Town, increasing its total market value to over $8 billion. However, before any figures were confirmed, Dominion's evaluation team, led by Danielle herself, had already received over 43 internal reports and anonymous feedback about discrimination, particularly with black customers and African staff. The reports came not just from low-level employees but also from former managers and small investors. A hotel chain that claimed to be luxurious but secretly practiced a soft customer selection policy based on racial and class standards. Danielle had remained silent for a month, observing, collecting, and having her staff infiltrate Lancaster Grand's operations in 3 cities. And now, she had come to New York, the heart of the system, where it was considered the brand ambassador of the entire chain, for the final verification. And in the first 10 minutes, Ethan Garrison had given her the clearest answer. No need to collect more data, no need to make phone calls for verification. The way he looked at her, from head to toe, the way he treated mocking a guest as a personal power play, and especially the way he publicly judged a black woman's financial capability with a sarcastic remark. All of that confirmed every previous hypothesis as true. Danielle stepped into the deluxe room they had downgraded her to. The room was clean, well-equipped, but it didn't have the panoramic windows of the suite. No Breville coffee machine as described, and the most important thing, there was no respect in the way it was given. She opened her laptop. An Excel sheet was already open. The first line was immediately added by her, Lancaster Grand. Flagship location, failed VIP protocol at check-in, racial profiling observed. Underneath was the timestamp, details of the interaction, the staff's attitude, and a note. Public embarrassment, high-risk indicator. Danielle wasn't angry. She wasn't surprised, because she had seen this too many times before, in London, in Munich, in Jakarta, and now, in the city where she had attended college. But what made her unable to remain silent this time was that Ethan wasn't just dismissing her. He was dismissing millions of black women. Those who work twice as hard, are 3 times as smart, but are still blocked by eyes like his, eyes that don't believe they belong in this world. And when those eyes are part of the service system, they are no longer just personal prejudices. They become an unspoken policy. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked down at the brightly lit Fifth Avenue below. The New York sky was turning purple. But inside Danielle, something had shifted, slowly, precisely, like the final gear slotting into place. Tomorrow, she would visit the lounge area. She would try the gym. She would call room service. And every action they took, every look, every tone of voice, would be a marker. Because from the moment Ethan opened his mouth, the game had begun. The next morning, as the gentle sunlight poured into the lower-tier room where Danielle had been downgraded, she was already up early. Not because she couldn't sleep, but because she had meticulously prepared for the second day of her short business trip, which could determine the fate of an empire. Today, she wasn't wearing a suit. Danielle chose a modest gray midi dress, flat shoes, and a thin cardigan. The outfit made her look more like an accountant or an ordinary consultant. Unassuming, with no hint of power. Just enough to make them drop their guard. And drop their guard they did. When she went downstairs for breakfast, Ethan wasn't at the counter. Instead, a younger female staff member was there, hesitant when she saw her room number. Perhaps she had read some report from a colleague. But that hesitation quickly turned into a cold demeanor. The buffet breakfast was still being served in the area reserved for suite guests and diamond cardholders. Danielle held her room key, the kind of key that should have granted her access to that area. But at the entrance, a staff member stopped her. "Sorry, only suite guests or those with lounge access are allowed in this area. I'm in room 916. I booked the executive package. According to the system, you're not authorized to enter, ma'am," the staff member said, then eyed her from head to toe, as though she were trying to intrude into a place she didn't belong. No further words were needed. Danielle took out her phone, snapped a photo of the area, the room key, and quickly made a note. Denied VIP lounge access despite executive booking. Staff tone, dismissive. Eye contact avoided. Racial profiling pattern consistent. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a system error. It was a choice. A deliberate one. On her way back to the main lobby, she passed the concierge desk. 2 employees were standing behind, having a quiet conversation. One of them, a male with platinum hair, about 40 years old, tilted his head, speaking softly but loud enough for her to hear. "Another PR stunt? I don't get why they keep bringing people like this in here." The words cut through the air. There was no mention of color. No words like black, minority, or diversity quota. But it was all implicitly there, lingering like the smell of cracked paint in a castle once considered indestructible. Danielle didn't turn back. She didn't say a word, but in her mind, each piece of evidence stacked up like tiles, forming an unassailable indictment. She returned to her room and opened the checklist again. New items were marked in red. Violation of lounge access rights despite booking under the executive package. Distinctly discriminatory attitude from concierge staff. No system check before denying services. Language suggesting racial discrimination. Then she typed in another note. This experience is not an isolated incident. The behavior system is stratified and exclusionary, evident at all touchpoints. Danielle paused, leaning back in her chair. Outside the window, New York was as bustling as ever, but in her mind, the images of what she had just gone through were no longer a personal story. This was the story of thousands of women like her, those who step into spaces designed to make them feel out of place. No need for no entry signs, no need for direct insults, just cold smiles, measuring glances, and brief words that make someone doubt their very existence in a place where they absolutely belong. That was the greatest crack in empires that proudly claimed to be global, sophisticated, luxurious. And Danielle knew these cracks always begin where people stop seeing others as human beings, but only as statistics, non-priority customers, or worse, unofficial nuisances. That evening, she continued testing the services, calling room service, booking the spa, requesting an early opening of the gym. And each response from staff, whether speaking too fast, giving short answers, or even ignoring her, was recorded, time-stamped, and saved in a secure video file. No one knew that this silent woman was the one who could initiate a full investigation into the entire Lancaster Grand system, have its investments revoked, and give it a C rating in corporate ethics, something that could cause the parent company's stock to plummet by 30% in less than a week. But because no one knew, they kept going. Sliding further down the familiar slope, where power was assumed by gray suits and white skin, and suspicion was always reserved for people like her. She looked at her watch. Tomorrow, she would speak directly with the front desk, and it wouldn't just be an experience anymore, it would be an interrogation. At 6:15 p.m. the next evening, Danielle changed into an elegant black cocktail dress, her hair neatly tied up, a small clutch in her hand as she left her room to head down to the hotel restaurant for dinner. She wasn't accompanied by an assistant, nor did she have bodyguards or any symbols of authority like the other VIP guests. She simply wanted to know, how would a black woman walking alone, not introducing her title, be treated in this elite paradise? The Lancaster Grand's restaurant was located on the mezzanine floor, filled with warm yellow lights and the polite whispers of guests enjoying their wine. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the vibrant New York cityscape below. The area near the windows was an unofficial privilege for the elite, where not only did people eat, but they were seen eating in the right place. Danielle walked up to the reception desk and smiled gently. "Whitaker, I have a reservation for 6:15, one person." The young woman at the desk, brown hair tied neatly, name tag reading Megan, looked up, her eyes freezing for a split second, too brief to be detected unless one was paying attention. But Danielle noticed. Megan quickly checked the system, then said, "Yes, we have a table for you. However, the window-side table is already taken. I'll take you to a table inside." Danielle glanced briefly toward the window area. 3 tables were completely empty. No reserved sign, no flowers, no preset glasses of water. A male server was wiping down the table near the window. His gaze briefly flicked over Danielle before looking toward Megan, signaling for her response. Danielle didn't speak, just nodded gently. "Inside is fine." She followed Megan to a table near the frosted glass wall at the back, at least 2 rows of tables away from the windows. She sat down, removed her coat, took out her phone, and pressed the hidden recording button embedded in the coat's lapel, a standard device for senior auditors conducting field evaluations. 5 minutes later, a middle-aged white couple walked in. No reservation, no special requests. Megan saw them, smiled brightly, and immediately led them to a table by the window. Danielle sat still, sipping her water, her eyes never leaving the phone screen beneath her sleeve. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't tremble. But inside, the disappointment had transformed into conviction. After dinner, she went up to the 3rd floor to check out the gym. At the reception desk, a young security staff member took her room key, flipping it over as if inspecting a fake ID. "Excuse me, you said you're in room 916? "Yes." "I need to confirm with the manager because today the gym is only available for guests with a prior reservation." Danielle didn't react. She silently watched the white man in sportswear behind her. No room key, no reservation, just a slight nod to the staff, and he was immediately let in. She smiled. A smile without joy. "That's fine," she said, then retrieved her room key. "I'll use another gym." Leaving the gym area, she stood in front of a large hallway mirror, adjusting her hair. In the quiet reflection was the image of a woman who no longer doubted. She was sure. Every piece of doubt had come together to form a clear picture. Discrimination at check-in. Denied lounge access. Denied a table by the window. Thoroughly checked while a white guest was let in immediately. None of it was overt, no public insults. But that made it more dangerous. It was disguised as fake professionalism, unwritten procedures, fleeting glances, and soft rejections. Danielle returned to her room. She transferred the data from the camera to her computer. Video footage, audio, behavior analysis. Each piece of evidence was neatly arranged like bullets in a revolving chamber. She didn't need to be angry. She didn't need to confront them. The truth was too clear. Tomorrow she would return to the front desk, and this time there would be no room key. Only a business card, with a name they should have checked from the very beginning. When the door to her room closed behind her at the end of the day, with no footsteps left in the hallway, no judging eyes or dismissive glances from the concierge desk, Danielle slipped off her shoes, removed her coat, and walked to the walnut wood desk by the window, opening her laptop. The room was now bathed in the soft light from the desk lamp. Outside, the lights of New York twinkled like a star map, but inside her, a campaign had just officially begun. The screen displayed the security interface of Dominion Ventures' internal system. Danielle opened the report file marked DVP-AUDIT-0422-LGNY, which she had created 3 weeks ago, now expanded to 47 pages. Each section, every form, every video clip from her hidden camera over the last 2 days was attached in full. Item 1. Violation of VIP check-in procedures at the front desk. Item 2. Unauthorized denial of lounge and premium service access. Item 3. Discrimination in the in-house restaurant. Item 4. Unequal handling of room key access in the gym. Item 5. Racist comments from concierge staff. Each item was clearly supported. Image excerpts, descriptions of the individuals involved, timestamps and risk assessments for the brand if made public. It wasn't just a case of poor service. It was a silent but deep system of exclusion targeting Black customers, especially women. She typed one last note into the file. Not an individual fault. Not a one-time occurrence. This is a behavior model maintained through training, through silent language, and through an unsupervised internal power structure. Lancaster Grand doesn't just need reform. It needs to be held accountable. She hit send. The report was directly sent to 3 teams. Crisis Communications Management. Legal department responsible for reviewing the investment contracts. The Dominion Ventures Ethics Council. Just one short meeting tomorrow morning, and the $2.8 billion deal, which was set to be publicly announced, would be indefinitely postponed. Danielle sat in silence for a few seconds. No smile, no sigh of relief. She wasn't doing this out of a fleeting emotion. She was doing it because it was her role, the responsibility she had taken on long ago, to speak up when others remained silent. She reached for her herbal tea, taking a sip. In the still room, the only sounds were the hum of the air conditioner and the muffled noise of traffic outside. But in her mind, the final pieces had clicked together into a complete picture. A picture of complacency, of white-dominated power, of faces that believed wearing a uniform and a name tag was enough to keep their place at the top of the pyramid. Danielle opened her phone. She sent a brief message via the internal app. I will meet with the front desk at 8 a.m. No need for security, no need for a secretary. I want to go alone. The reply came with a single word. Understood. She set her phone down, took a black business card from her handbag, its silver border simple, without any slogans, just the Dominion logo and the words, Danielle A. Whitaker, Senior Director of Global Equity Compliance. She stared at it for a long time. This small piece of paper had once brought a CEO to his knees in a shareholders' meeting. It had once caused a European hotel chain to shut down its entire Eastern European branch. And now, it was about to become the final introduction that Lancaster Grand needed to hear. Danielle placed the business card on the desk next to her laptop as a silent invitation for the morning. Then she stood up, closed the curtains, turned off the lights, and went to bed. But it wasn't the sleep of someone who had finished their work. It was the sleep of someone who was about to take action. At 7:55 a.m., right on the unspoken appointment she had set for herself, Danielle appeared in the lobby of the Lancaster Grand, exactly where, 2 days ago, Ethan Garrison had turned it into a stage for mockery and discrimination. She wore a suit again today, a deep navy blue with a neat pointed collar and a small silver triangular pin, the symbol of the Global Fairness Review program she had built. Her face was lightly made up, just enough to let the light reflect off her healthy brown skin and the sharp eyes hidden beneath long lashes. She walked straight to the reception desk, no looking left or right, no need to wait. Ethan, typing something on the screen, looked up. In the fraction of a second, his eyes scanned her familiar face, and then he forced a professional smile, the same one he had used to mask his underlying disdain. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I assist you?" Danielle stood tall, not smiling. Her voice was calm, but each word sliced through the air between them like a blade. "Good morning, Ethan. I'd like to know why I was treated like a fraud here." His smile faltered slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" Danielle tilted her head slightly. "Let me remind you. The mockery about the Centurion card on the first day. The downgrade of my room, contrary to the booking confirmation. Denial of lounge access. The discriminatory attitude from the restaurant and gym staff. Oh, and the little comment your concierge whispered about another PR stunt." Ethan gulped. His face went pale, as though someone had just yanked the rug out from under him. The people around, a few guests waiting to check out, a luggage assistant and the morning receptionist, began to stop in their tracks. Danielle didn't raise her voice, but her words were clear enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. She opened her purse and pulled out an item, a solid black business card, thick with a silver border. She placed it gently on the counter so softly that it made no sound, but decisively enough to feel like a thunderclap. "Danielle A. Whitaker, Senior Director of Global Compliance Dominion Equity Partners." He stared at the words. It took a few seconds for his mind to catch up with the reality, and when it did, his face drained of color. I don't know." "No need to explain," she interrupted. "I didn't come here to hear your excuses." She took back the business card, but she didn't leave. "I came to inform you that Dominion has sent the final evaluation report of Lancaster Grand to the Corporate Ethics Board, the relevant investors, and the international media team." Ethan froze. He couldn't speak anymore. "And I also came to show you clearly how a seemingly harmless sarcastic remark can bring an empire to its knees." She turned to walk away. But just a few steps in, Danielle paused, not looking back. Had there just been one respectful look, one proper word, I would have been the one signing the contract for your global market expansion. She turned her head slightly, her gaze colder than ice. "But you chose to mock a black woman instead of checking her name." Ethan seemed frozen. His hand trembled, unable to hit the keyboard anymore. At that moment, the internal phone rang. The receptionist hurried to pick it up. She listened, nodded, then looked at Ethan with a stunned expression. "Mr. Ethan, the CEO just called. He requests that you come to his office immediately." A nearby guest whispered, "What's going on here?" Another guest pulled out their phone and began recording. The story wasn't over, but Ethan knew. His part had just come to an end. "Do you know what you just did?" Danielle continued, her voice calm but as cold as glass below freezing. "It's not just losing a client," she paused, glancing at Ethan's dazed eyes. "It's losing the future." Then she turned and walked away, decisively, without looking back. Her footsteps echoed rhythmically on the marble floor, but in Ethan's mind, each step felt like a hammer strike to a verdict that hadn't been delivered yet. The lobby was silent as death. A middle-aged man, wearing a business suit, standing in line waiting to check in, quietly pulled out his phone and hit record. The black woman who had just walked away clearly didn't need to raise her voice, shout, or threaten. With just a business card, she had made the entire space hold its breath. 10 minutes later, a 43-second video appeared on Twitter with the headline, "Dominion Equity's Black CEO confronts Lancaster Hotel reception and leaves him speechless." Hashtags: Danielle Whitaker, Black Card Power, and Know Her Name quickly shot to the trending top. Meanwhile, at the top floor of the building, where the Northeast Regional Executive Office of Lancaster Grand was located, an emergency meeting had begun. The regional CEO, Richard Colburn, 58, received a call from the investment board less than 15 minutes after the video went viral. The second call from Dominion Equity's legal office came without a greeting. No preamble, just one sentence. "Cancel negotiations. Halt all PR expansion activities. Review the legal contracts. All data will be made public within the next 12 hours. Colburn slammed his hand on the table, shouting into the phone, but no one was listening to his orders anymore. Because he knew, he truly knew, they had just lost $2.8 billion. Not because of Daniel. No, Danielle Whitaker, the woman they had never bothered to check the name of, hadn't shouted or caused a scandal. She simply showed up, presented the truth, and let the system collapse under the weight of its own accumulated arrogance. At the same time, in the hotel's technical control room, an IT engineer was desperately trying to find the internal video recordings of Danielle's conversation with Ethan to manage the crisis. But no one could find a way to delete the original clip filmed by an external guest. No one could stop the spreading wave that was passing through millions of shares, thousands of angry comments. "I was denied lounge access here because I'm a black woman. I worked as a server at Lancaster in 2021. Everything she said is absolutely true. I once saw Ethan kick out a guest because they didn't look like the one who made the reservation." The truth no longer needed defenders. It had awakened. Ethan stood there at the empty reception desk. The phone's internal ring echoed relentlessly, but he could no longer hear clearly. Everything around him seemed to blur. A patch of white noise filled his ears. 4 minutes later, a woman in a gray suit, from the HR department, approached him, her expression stern. "Ethan, please come with me to the executive office, immediately." No explanation, no comforting words. He quietly followed. Leaving behind the reception desk he had once considered his own stage. Leaving behind the eyes of the guests who were no longer curious, but now condemning. And Danielle? She didn't go back to her room. She left the hotel through the back exit, avoiding the chaos that had erupted behind her like an unquenchable fire. Not in a hurry, not checking her phone, not looking at Twitter. She knew what was happening. and she knew she didn't need to stay to witness it, because she had done what needed to be done. One word, one business card, one truth. That was all it took to bring down an empire. Less than an hour after Danielle left the Lancaster Grand, the video capturing her confrontation with Ethan had spread across social media platforms like a powerful storm. First on Twitter. Then, within 30 minutes, it appeared on TikTok, Instagram Reels, Reddit, and countless groups focused on hotel services, racial discrimination, and women's rights. 12.4 million views within 24 hours. 1.6 million shares. 362,000 comments just in the first morning. And the hashtags began to appear, not from Dominion's media department, not from mainstream activists, but from everyday users, those who had experienced something similar but had never had a voice loud enough. Black woman with power. Danielle. Whitaker. Not your luxury. Token, Hancock, check the name before. You judge, Hank Lancaster exposed. A wave of anger rose from all corners. But it wasn't a chaotic fury. It was a storm with structure, evidence, and a foundation. What did people see in the video? Not just a black woman being humiliated. They saw Danielle's calm gaze as she was mocked. They saw a direct challenge without the need to yell. They saw a small business card, but one with enough weight to make the whole system tremble. And they saw one thing. Discrimination doesn't need to be shouted to be discrimination. It lies in the eyes, in words that seem harmless, in who is trusted and who is doubted. It wasn't just the ordinary people speaking up. Journalists from the New York Times, The Atlantic, NPR began posting analyses. Trevor Noah's evening talk show opened with the line, "A black card, a sarcastic remark, a business card, and a lesson for those who still think they control the gates of power." Danielle didn't speak, but she was mentioned on CNN, CNBC, Vox, and even the BBC as one of the new symbols of civility, someone who used determination, not anger, to expose how a luxury industry still silently operated on a foundation of exclusion and white privilege. Meanwhile, at Lancaster Grand, the entire building had descended into chaos. Receptionists were overwhelmed with inquiries. The reservation phone stopped ringing, not because it was busy, but because it was being canceled. Ethan had been suspended, but that wasn't enough. Dozens of Lancaster's partner hotels began to suspend their business relationships. A financial group in London withdrew from a $600 million investment deal. An international airline ceased offering vacation packages. But the worst were the personal responses. In the video's comment section, thousands of black people shared their experiences at Lancaster Grand and similar hotels. I was once asked by staff here, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" I was directed to the employee entrance when I arrived at the lobby, even though I was wearing office attire. My mother was asked to prove her reservation 3 times in one evening. The media dubbed this the Danielle Whitaker effect. It wasn't a scandal that erupted and then faded away. It was a turning point, where luxurious and polite discrimination was exposed, and those who had once been victims now had a tangible face to trust, to follow. Danielle didn't need to make a speech. She didn't need to go on air. The business card she placed on the front desk that day was her statement, and the world had read it with all the respect she had never been given. By 5 p.m. on the same day, just under 90 minutes after the video of Danielle's confrontation with Ethan went viral, an emergency meeting was called at the headquarters of Lancaster Global Holdings, the parent company of the Lancaster Grand Hotel chain, located on Park Avenue, Manhattan. 7 members of the board appeared in person, while the other 4 joined via Zoom from Paris, Dubai, and Tokyo. There was no time left to blame the PR department or wait for an internal review. On the large screen, the video of Danielle Whitaker and Ethan Garrison was played back without commentary. No editing, no post-production. After 3 minutes of heavy silence, one of the investment board members, Lois Freeman, a representative from Equinox Capital, spoke directly. "We're not facing a bad PR incident. We're facing a piece of convicting evidence." At Lancaster Grand, New York, the atmosphere had become as suffocating as a storm waiting to strike. The regional director, Richard Colburn, who had ignored more than 10 internal reports of discriminatory behavior from the front desk staff, was suspended immediately during the emergency meeting at 1:45 p.m. Ethan Garrison, who had prided himself as the trustworthy face of the front desk, was fired on the spot, banned from returning to the lobby, prohibited from sending a farewell email to the staff, and had his internal system access revoked within 10 minutes. All customer feedback data from the past 24 months was forwarded to an independent audit unit, something that had never happened since Lancaster's inception. The luxury travel agency, Voyage Elite, canceled all 17 VIP events previously contracted with Lancaster for the year. A global financial seminar chain, which had planned to hold its annual event at Lancaster, London, announced it would be relocating to Hilton Mayfair. Not because of poor service, not because of pricing, but because the brand image had officially rotted. On hotel industry forums, an anonymous letter was circulated. It was a scanned copy of the resignation letter from the North American Operations Director, sent directly to the chairman of the company. I have warned about the subtle exclusionary attitude exhibited by the front desk staff at Lancaster Grand, New York, towards black guests, but every feedback was under review. I cannot continue to represent an organization that chooses silence when action is needed. R. D. Brooks, COO, North America Operations. International media began calling it the Lancaster Incident. No longer a scandal, but a case study in MBA programs on risk management, branding, and the power of an individual who knows what they are standing for. The HR departments of more than 60 Lancaster hotels were instructed to review all employee training procedures. Internal reports from the last 2 years were required to be made public to Dominion Ventures' independent auditors, a mandatory condition if future negotiations were to continue. What made the situation uncontainable was not the speed of the video's spread, but the symbolism Danielle embodied. A black woman, not screaming, not demanding special privileges, not slamming the table, not needing reporters or a live stream. She simply used their system, their process, her business card, to make them reveal the rot beneath their luxurious veneer. On television, a branding expert said during the evening news, Lancaster didn't collapse because of a mistake. They collapsed because of systemic arrogance. They thought they had enough power to judge others, without considering that the person they were judging might be the one setting the rules. From the outside, the Lancaster Grand building still stood tall, its glass reflecting the New York sunlight. But inside, the pillars had cracked, and everyone knew. This was no longer a luxury empire. It was the corpse of a brand that didn't change before the truth knocked on its door. While the Lancaster incident was still making headlines across every major outlet, on the 39th floor of Dominion Ventures headquarters in Washington, D.C.'s financial district, a quiet yet ruthless decision was made with just a nod. No press conference, no public gathering. Just a private 42-minute meeting with the 7 members of Dominion's executive team, including the director of corporate ethics, the head of global investment strategy, and Danielle Whitaker, the woman who had destroyed the credibility of Lancaster Grand without raising her voice. At 10:43 a.m., the chairwoman of the board, Angela Raines, concluded, "The entire $2.8 billion partnership deal with Lancaster Global Holdings will be immediately canceled. The reason? Failure to meet corporate ethics standards in violation of structural equality principles." The investigation report was made publicly available on Dominion's website by noon that same day. No embellishments, no evasions. Each chapter was a slap to the opulent image Lancaster had tried to maintain. The Lancaster hotel chain demonstrates a pattern of racial, gender, and class discrimination in its reception, service, and customer feedback management across its flagship locations. The violations are not isolated incidents, but structural, systematic, recurring, and legitimized by the silence of middle and upper management. Right beneath the conclusion was the italicized line, "Dominion Ventures does not invest in places that build castles on exclusion." The hotel industry was in shock. No one had expected the deal once called the deal of the century. With expectations of opening 27 more Lancaster Grand hotels across Asia, the Middle East, and South America, to evaporate in just 72 hours because a black woman dared to say, "I deserve respect." Financial brokers fled from Lancaster Global's stock as if avoiding a plague. In just 48 hours after the announcement, the company's market value dropped by 26%. Business Insider published a cold article with the headline, "From the Heights to the Depths." Lancaster lost $2.8 billion just for failing to recognize a business card. Dominion's strategic department received over 70 proposals from other hotel chains wanting to start over based on the new corporate ethics standards. Because they understood, if they didn't change now, they could be the next name on the operating table. At Lancaster Grand, New York, the gleaming brass plaques that read, "Tradition of Excellence since 1924, were still firmly affixed to the walls. But guests now only looked, then quietly turned away. Trust isn't shattered by a crack. It collapses when the very foundation is built on deception. As for Danielle, she kept silent with the media. Within Dominion, she only spoke one sentence when the reporting session with the chairman ended. "I didn't do this for myself. I did it for the thousands of people who can't walk through that hotel lobby without being seen as a risk." The entire room fell silent. Not from shock, but from respect. A woman, with a business card, a calm voice, and an unwavering determination, had changed the fate of an entire corporation. From the nod that canceled the $2.8 billion deal in the Dominion Ventures boardroom, the domino effect spread quickly like an underground wave, silent, but powerful and irreversible. The incident at Lancaster Grand was no longer seen as a bad PR incident or the isolated experience of a VIP guest. It became a symbol, a profound wake-up call for the entire global hotel industry. Luxury was no longer defined by crystal, high ceilings, and 4-digit room rates, but by how they treated the people who walked through their doors. In the 3 weeks following Dominion's release of the investigation report, more than 40 hotel chains worldwide announced they would undergo internal ethics audits, including major names such as Monarch Residences International, Aurelius Hospitality Group, Maison Elara, Horizon Collection. They didn't wait for the media to force their hand. They proactively reviewed their recruitment, training, and customer service processes, especially at their locations in North America, Europe, and the Middle East. A series of new policies began to emerge. Blind hiring. Candidate profiles would have their names, photos, gender, and nationality hidden during the first round of selection to eliminate unconscious bias. Bias simulation training. Mandatory training for all front desk and management staff. Using virtual reality to recreate unconscious discrimination scenarios. Mandatory feedback for minority groups. Customers who are Black, LGBTQ+, or disabled would receive separate survey forms to ensure that discrimination-related feedback wasn't buried. 24/7 anonymous hotline allowing employees to report discrimination in the workplace, ensuring absolute confidentiality without going through the facility's management. Ernst & Young launched a new service called the Ethical Hospitality Audit, a service specifically designed for the hotel industry, directly inspired by the Lancaster incident. The service was named the Whitaker Standard, and in their launch speech an EY representative said, "A woman walked through the lobby and left a business card. But she left more than that, a new standard for the global hotel industry." At universities from Harvard Business School to INSEAD, the case study titled The Lancaster Collapse was incorporated into the official curriculum. They didn't teach it just to analyze the financials, but to help students understand corporate culture doesn't begin in PowerPoint. It begins at the front desk in attitude, in how you look at a stranger. In the media industry, PR firms and brand management agencies were forced to adjust their crisis image management strategies. A specialist from McKinsey wrote in an internal report, "You can't win people over if the organization's operational nature is toxic. True change doesn't come from adjusting the message. It comes from fixing the system that created those wrong words." Danielle didn't step into the spotlight. She didn't accept invitations from TED Talks. She declined nominations for Woman of the Year from 3 prestigious organizations. She refused to take a cover photo for Time, not because she didn't appreciate it, but because she understood this story wasn't hers alone. A colleague of Danielle's at Dominion once said, "She doesn't want to be the center. She wants to be the starting point." And that's what made what she did not just a punch to the old structure, but an invitation to rise for everyone who had ever been asked to step back. An entire industry began to change, not for the market, not for the media, but because there was one person who dared not stay silent when insulted, one person who didn't need to shout, didn't need to call the press, just a business card, and the strength to stand tall. When the name Danielle Whitaker became a symbol in the international hotel industry, while the world was still marveling at the Lancaster effect, the woman behind that seismic shift continued to show up at work on time, with a cup of black coffee, no sugar, and diligently editing reports on her 15-inch screen as if nothing had ever happened. No spotlight, no podcasts, no self-written journey articles. She didn't update her LinkedIn, she didn't post reflections on Twitter, she didn't accept offers from any publishers to write a memoir. When talk shows emailed inviting her to speak on women's rights, racism, or the inspiring journey, Danielle only responded with a brief line from her secretary. "Thank you for the invitation, but Ms. Whitaker does not accept interviews, not at this time." Her office at Dominion had no fresh flowers, no plaques showcasing achievements, just a small framed photo. A black and white picture of her grandmother, who had worked as a laundress in Mississippi in the 1960s and was kicked out of a hotel when white guests complained that clothes were folded by someone like her. Danielle grew up with that memory, and she knew, when injustice becomes a culture, resistance doesn't need to be flashy. It just needs to be precise. One day, a reporter from the New York Times, who had reported fairly on the Lancaster incident, left an envelope in the mailbox at the front desk of Dominion's office. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Miss Whitaker, you made the world tremble without saying a word, but women like me need to hear you speak. Why are you silent?" 3 days later, the reporter received a reply. Not an article, not a speech, just a small piece of paper folded into 4, with Danielle's personal signature. "I don't need to speak. They have already exposed themselves." No one could have expressed it better. Ethan Garrison had his professional records blocked in the high-end service industry. Richard Colburn, the regional director, retreated into seclusion, refusing to speak with the press. CEOs who had once shaken hands across negotiation tables with Dominion now bowed their heads, relearning the rules of conduct from the ground up. No one was punished by her. It was the system they built that betrayed them when faced with the truth. Danielle still worked in closed-door meetings, evaluating deals that outsiders would never know about. She didn't seek justice through media lenses. She designed justice with data, principles, and a silence that carried weight. She once told a young colleague, "They expect black women to scream, to be angry, to tear the sky apart. I don't. I want them to look in the mirror and ask themselves, why are we afraid of someone who doesn't threaten us?" She didn't need revenge. She needed results. And she had them, not in the form of a resounding victory, but in a change that spread to the very roots. Danielle Whitaker's business card didn't just end a deal. It also marked the beginning of a downfall named Ethan Garrison, the man who once stood behind the Lancaster Grand front desk with a half smile and a gaze that valued people solely by the color of their skin and the way they spoke. Ethan Garrison's name had never been famous, but after a video less than a minute long, he became a global symbol for arrogance and ignorance dressed in luxury. Within 24 hours of the video going viral, the internet community uncovered Ethan's entire personal profile. LinkedIn, work history, an old Twitter account with posts full of subtle references like those who have a black card but dress like housekeeping, who wouldn't be suspicious, and even private groups where he boasted about polite discrimination being an art. All of it was screenshot, stored, and made public. Job platforms like Glassdoor and Indeed immediately flagged his name, blocking him from registering. LinkedIn shut down his account after receiving over 10,000 reports of violating community guidelines. A few old friends tried to defend him. Ethan was just doing his job, misunderstood. But just one audio clip from the video. "Oh, this kind usually gets maxed out real fast," was enough to shatter every defense. He tried applying for a job at a small hotel in Vermont. He was rejected the moment the manager saw his name on the application. In Maine, he tried to change his name and apply to work as a wedding server, but a guest recognized him and snapped a photo. That photo made its way to Reddit within 2 hours, with the caption, "The guy who once disrespected a powerful female executive is now pouring wine at someone else's wedding. Definition of karma." Eventually, Ethan retreated to a small town in Wyoming, a place with no big hotels, no media, and no one cared about his reputation. He rented a wooden cabin, stopped using social media, changed his phone number, and never left the house without a hat, glasses, and a high-collared coat. The neighbors only knew of him through a rumor. "There's a guy who did something notorious online. Now he lives in seclusion." His mental state began to deteriorate, not because he felt guilty, but because he had been stripped of his familiar role, the gatekeeper of the elite world. Ethan had once believed that he was the one who judged who deserved to step through the hotel lobby. He thought his cold gaze, his offhand comments, and his use of internal procedures were enough to drown anyone who irritated him. But he had chosen the wrong person. Danielle didn't collapse. She didn't seek compensation. She simply pulled out a business card and let the system pull him down the abyss. Some say Ethan is pitiable. Some say Ethan is just a product of a subtly discriminatory environment. But as a journalist wrote in The Guardian, Ethan wasn't destroyed by the media. He was consumed by the very mirror he used to judge others. The question is no longer, what did Ethan lose? It's, how many people like Ethan are still believed to not need to change? Danielle Whitaker never returned to Lancaster Grand, not because she held a grudge or was avoiding memories, but because she didn't need to. That building, with its marble columns and crystal chandeliers, still stands, but it is no longer the proud fortress of a luxurious hotel empire. It has become a living monument to a collective failure, the failure to see the person beneath the skin, beyond the card. Danielle never came to win, she came to measure, and when the measurement was done, she let the truth do the rest. No need for a microphone, no need for sympathy, no need to tell her hardships, just presence, dignified, not bowed. Somewhere, people like Ethan still exist. There are still invisible front desks in hospitals, schools, offices, airports, where people are judged based on their skin color, name, accent, or hairstyle. And somewhere, there are people like Danielle, who could choose silence to make life easier, but still choose to speak up. She didn't scream for justice. She made the system look at itself and dismantle itself. Because sometimes great revolutions don't start with blood or brokenness. They start with a simple moment, one person refusing to stay silent, a question posed to the one who thought they were the judge. After Lancaster, Danielle still worked as usual. Still sat at her desk by the window. Still drank black coffee, no sugar. But for the first time in years, a group of interns from historically black colleges proactively requested to intern in her department. And when asked, "Why choose Dominion?" a young woman replied, "Because I want to learn how to speak without raising my voice." This story doesn't end at Lancaster Grand. It doesn't stop at the hotel industry. It is a reflection of any place that uses power to judge rather than serve. Any system that thinks it's too big to be challenged. And in the end, the question isn't for Ethan. It's not for Lancaster. It's for you. When injustice happens, will you bow your head and move on? Or will you stop, turn around, and place a business card on the table, just like Danielle did? Because there are moments in life when you don't need to shout, you just need to stand tall. The story of Danielle Whitaker isn't just a victory of timely silence, of steel-like composure. It's a powerful reminder that injustice doesn't always scream. It can come with a sarcastic smile, a disdainful look, or a seemingly harmless comment at a hotel lobby. But justice sometimes doesn't need to be loud. Just one person daring to stand tall and say, "Enough." So, what about you? Have you ever been disrespected because of your appearance, skin color, gender, or background? And if so, how did you respond? Share your story in the comments below. Who knows, your courage might be the spark for another awakening. If you believe this story deserves to be shared, hit like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss real stories, where an ordinary person can make extraordinary change. Thank you for watching. See you in the next journeys.